on air here. All right, we are on air.
Yay.
Yay. Okay. So what I'm going to do there, now it's going to bounce back and forth to you and I, Melissa, I believe.
Cool. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So let's see. I don't see anyone popping in there. Oh, because it's not going to actually let them in until the top of the hour.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, which should be now. So they should start popping in.
Yeah.
Okay. So everyone, if you could hear us, Melissa Hall and Becky DeGrossa here.
Hello.
As you come in, go ahead and introduce yourselves. Just go ahead and put your name and tell us where you're from. That would be great.
Good morning, Linda.
So are you seeing people saying?
Yep. I can see a comment from Linda.
That's funny. So now you can see and I can't.
Oh,
Now I can see it. Okay.
no. Okay, good.
Yeah, and Lucy from Calgary.
Awesome.
Yeah, so strange. It's the messages are kind of popping in and out for me for some reason. Oh well, they're gonna pop in here. Denise from Iowa. Hey Denise, welcome. Yep. Now the numbers are climbing. Just took a little while to get going here.
We got people from all over. La Quinta, Sarasota, Florida, Ventura.
Yep. You're seeing them faster than I am for some reason, Melissa.
Maybe it's my blazing fast internet.
I guess it is. Maybe they make it faster in California than they do in Colorado.
Not in all places, but where we live now, we get blazing internet. It's awesome.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Raya from Ventura, Sabrina from Nevada City. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're looking for the EHR goddess, you're in the right place. We'll give people a few more minutes to come in here and introduce themselves, and then what I usually find is that people keep trickling in after we start, and that's cool. That's fine.
Yeah.
Jennifer from Connecticut. Do you see more than that, Melissa?
Yeah, I see Marcella from New York and Lori from Plano, Texas.
All right.
And then Lorena sent everyone a welcome message.
Awesome. Good.
Oh, and Kathy from Montana. Beautiful state over there.
Yeah. I have not been, believe it or not, even though I'm not that far from Montana.
Yeah.
Need to get there. Yeah. All right. Well, it is 3 after, so I'm going to go ahead and do introductions here, and we're going to dive in and get started. And so I want to, well, for those of you who don't know me, this is Becky DeGrossa with Counseling Wise, founder of Counseling Wise. And today I have the honor of having Melissa Hall here with me. And Melissa is going to talk about intakes and private practice EHR, improving efficiency, and just having that whole process of the intake go well while you're doing your EHR thing in the beginning with your clients. Okay, we all know that that can be a little tricky. And it was really interesting when Melissa and I were talking. We did a little dry run last week of the system here to make sure everything went well. And we have a similar history in that we've both been involved in big EHR rollouts in large mental health agencies, and doing the training for all the clinicians, and traveling from center to center and training people on that, getting them ready for the EHR that was about to hit, and answering all those questions about You know, how do I use this stupid technology? I'm used to sitting there and just talking to my client face to face, and right, how's this going to work? I don't know. But so that was kind of fun to talk about that together, and that we've had that similar experience. I'm certainly rusty. I haven't been involved in it since then, and that was several years ago. But Melissa is up to date on all of that and helping private practice clinicians. Melissa also has a website called QA Prep, and so you can check that out. And we'll make sure that we mention that at the end so that you can go see what else she has out there. And I think, Melissa, I'm going to turn it over to you to say anything else you would like to say to introduce yourself, and then you can control your destiny with your screen share.
Cool. All right, then. Thank you, Becky. And yeah, I think another piece of learning how to interact with EHR is also teaching clinicians how to talk to the tech people. So that was something that I really had to learn in that whole process, and that's been very valuable in everything I've done since then. So I'll try to remember to add that in a little bit when I'm talking about different things, because that's huge too. So my big specialization is documentation. Obviously, that creates a big crossover with EHRs, so it becomes a beautiful relationship. So if we are all set, I will go ahead and start sharing my screen, and we'll dive in here.
Yeah.
All righty. And can you see the slides here?
I can see them, and everybody who's out there, if you can just chime in and chat and let us know if you can see the slides. There's a little delay with Google Hangouts, but
cool.
Let's just make sure that they can see them too before you
dive in here.
Yeah, we don't want you talking to nobody, right? Not a good feeling. Can you see a response from them yet? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we got the slides going?
Yep, we do.
Okay, cool. All right. So we are talking about intakes and using a private practice EHR. And we're really going to focus on tips for both improving your efficiency while also keeping your clients engaged, because I know that's one of the biggest concerns I hear from clinicians when they turn to technology for different things. So specifically what we're going to talk about today is identifying strategies to prepare your clients for the intake process before they even walk in the door. We're also going to look at how you can work smarter and not harder by letting technology do some of the work for you. And then identify ways of organizing your systems so that you can maximize your efficiency. And then lastly, really focus in at the end on how you keep your clients engaged while you're actually reviewing and signing forms, you know, if that's electronically, the old-fashioned way, however you do it. And that's one of the things we'll talk about, or I'll talk about throughout today, is that there's a lot of different methods. Some people are going to be totally electronic with their EHR, meaning that their clients are going to have, you know, a portal they log into, everything's going to be signed electronically. Other people are going to do a little combination of the two, and maybe you do some things on paper and some things on the computer. And then some people do most things on paper and then just do your notes maybe, or keep client data in a system. So all of those can apply, and I'll try to address all of that. Also, if you have questions throughout, feel free to type them in the chat box. And if it's something that, you know, kind of applies, then Becky can let me know. And if not, we'll be saving the last 15 minutes for questions specifically. And Becky will be here to answer more of your tech questions. So if you do, you know, she knows a little bit more about the techie stuff than I do, so she may be able to help with that too if you have questions about how something could work with your website and stuff like that.
Yep.
Cool. All right. And also, before we get started, there are a ton of EHRs. So if you do have a question about your specific EHR, I may or may not have an answer. My answer will most likely be to ask the people at the EHR that you work with. So, so feel free to ask. Maybe there are other people on the webinar who can type in the chat box. They may know an answer. So don't feel like you can't ask, but just know I may not be able to answer your question if it's specific to the EHR you're using. All right, so let's talk about strategies to prepare your clients. So this is a big thing. Not only are clinicians kind of nervous about technology, but sometimes clients may not necessarily, I don't find them to be nervous about it, but they're just new to it. So you want to make sure that you prepare your clients ahead of time. And one of the biggest ways that clinicians overlook when they start getting into technology and using technology is to make use of the phone. So, usually the beginning of therapy is still the same as it was before. You're on the phone with a client. It's very rare that you're going to be, scheduling everything through an email and never actually talk to your client on the phone before they come into your office. So make use of that time. Make sure that you explain the process in detail. So things like, how do they get to your office, or how do they get to the EHR to access it? If you're having them go into a client portal, how do they get your forms ahead of time? Will you send them? Will they log into somewhere? Will they get an email? Those are all things that you want to make sure you let people know over the phone. So even if you do follow up with some kind of email or login or something like that, you want to make sure that you explain it as in person as you can be. And then you have a chance to ask for questions and get feedback from people too. So definitely don't overlook that part. And you'll see that's a key thing I'll hit home multiple times, is not to forget the way you used to do things. So typically when you do run into a problem with your EHR, people kind of freak out a little bit because it's so new and they don't know what to do. And the first thing is to usually step back and say, how did I do this before in EHR? How would I have done this on paper? And that will usually lead you to the answer. So the last point here is to explain, that this may be different from a regular session. So talking about your intake, everyone does their intake differently. Some people kind of spend maybe a few minutes going over paperwork and then pretty much jump into a session. Other people might spend, 1 to 4 full sessions doing history or background or getting different information, reviewing goals, things like that. So however you do your intake, your first session should be a little different from the rest of your sessions, because you should be going over paperwork and the relationship of you and the client and that kind of thing. So you do want to explain ahead of time, set people up that this will be a little bit different, but we will be able to dive in. And the key here is to really try and get to know you as best I can. All right, the next thing is to have your forms online. So this can be really, really helpful just for organization's sake. So it keeps you organized. It gives people really easy access to the forms if they ever need them, and also if they need to complete them. So this could mean a couple of different things. It may mean just having your forms available on your website, and that way you can tell people maybe during that phone conversation, okay, log in. Are you on my website? Okay, click here on this page. You'll see all my forms here on this page. Maybe you have an information page or something. And then let people download those forms and fill them out and complete them ahead of time. Or perhaps you give them a client portal login, and so you let them know how they can go in there and access the forms. However you do it, have your forms online somewhere. Even if you have a client portal, I recommend having your forms on your website, just for transparency's sake, so that if people do have a question, it's very rare that people read through and understand everything in your intake forms, right? So even if they did read through and you did a great job explaining everything, 2 months later, they may not remember what your cancellation policy is. So having forms on your website really helps with that whole thing. Make sure you have clear directions on who completes what. So this comes up sometimes if you see like couples or families, if you see children, make sure to really delineate who is completing what form. Like if you see couples, you want them to each complete a form. Is there anything you want them to complete together? If you see kids, are there things that you want the children to complete versus the parent, etc. If you're seeing individual adults, it's usually not an issue. But do make sure that you let people know what you expect to be completed ahead of time. Not everyone has clients complete paperwork ahead of time. It's something I recommend for efficiency's sake, since we're talking about efficiency today. And it helps you to be able to focus in on what your client has already identified. And I also like having clients complete things ahead of time, because then you give them a chance to write things out in their own words, and you can go through that, whether it's on paper or on a computer screen. You can look through what they've written and actually pull out their own phrases. And then you'll likely have things that will pop out at you that you can then focus on. And lastly, make sure to give direction on what to sign and what to bring in. I know this seems really obvious, but if you look from the client perspective, a lot of times it's not very obvious. So we're so used to doing this over and over. If you have someone who's never been to therapy before, this might be very new for them. And so you want to make sure that you really spell out exactly what you would like done. Another thing is also to think about reminders. So if you do want people to fill out paperwork ahead of time, then how are you going to remind them to do that? Maybe you talk with someone and your appointment's not for 2 weeks. So you want to make sure you do give some sort of reminder in between. Even if you work with really high functioning clients who are really on top of stuff, it's nice to give people a reminder so that they have time to get that done. And then it helps you both out. All right, if you can with your EHR, definitely use a client portal. And the big thing with using a client portal is that it helps with all the privacy issues. That way, if you can avoid email, it's better. Avoiding email is not something you have to do, but the most secure way you can communicate with people is the best way. So if you can have people have a login where they go into a secure portal, it's awesome. But you want to make sure anytime you are increasing the amount of technology people are using, especially that they're not used to, then you want to increase the amount of direction you're giving people. So you're probably starting to see a theme here already. But make sure you provide really clear instructions for logging in. Make sure you provide really clear instructions for what you want completed and how to find it. A great way to do this, if you can, again, it depends on how you can set this up in your particular EHR. But if you can have people log in and immediately see some kind of a welcome message from you. So maybe it's just, a PDF that you type up that's, welcome to the client portal. Here's what you do. Click here. And make sure to really spell out, and actually when you're spelling out directions, a lot of times I'll find that we try to do this from memory and it doesn't work very well. So you might think client portal and maybe your EHR calls it something different. Maybe they call it client access system. I don't know. So you want to make sure when you're doing anything online, you use the exact phrase that's on the screen that people will see. So if you do some kind of a welcome message, then make sure you're actually logging in and looking at what everything is titled so that you can tell people exactly where to go. And then lastly, you always want to provide details on how to get tech help. So people will quote unquote break your system or figure things out or find a way to do something that you didn't know could be done a certain way. And in most cases, you're not going to be super familiar with the EHR as far as problem solving. So this is something that, number one, you want to make sure you discuss with your EHR ahead of time. If people have difficulty accessing the system in any way, what is the step that they should take? Where do I direct them? What are your hours? So if people are online at 11 p.m. filling this out, will they be able to get help? And if they can't get help at 11 p.m., when will they get that help? Will they get an email right away? What's the response time? Is there a number they can call, or should it be an email, or is there a little chat box? Those things you want to be really clear with when you're providing people any kind of online access. They need to know how to get their questions answered. Otherwise, you will get either frustrated responses, or you'll be getting emails and then you'll be going back and forth. Whereas if you set everything up for success, when problems do come up, they're much, much easier to handle. All right. Another thing to consider with your client portal is, can people log in multiple times? So if you're expecting people to log in after the intake process, you may not really need them to, but sometimes some EHRs provide like client journaling and ways for you to share documents and stuff like that. So if you're using something that has that type of access, you probably want people to be logging in fairly regularly. So let people know, should they write down their password and log in, so that they'll be using it later. And again, with all of this stuff, you just want to be putting yourself in the client's shoes. What would be helpful if I were the client, if I were using this new system, if I were going to therapy as a new client? What would I want to feel secure and welcomed? All right, so how do we let technology work for us? We've been talking about that a little bit. One big thing is to just ditch the paper. I recommend this. There is no point in having an EHR if you're going to hang on to paper, and there are a lot of people who do this. So even if you do some things on paper, that's okay. You can do something on paper, scan it into the EHR, make sure that it's all saved in there, you have something electronic, and then shred it. There used to be a couple of, I think there was like 1 or 2 states that had said maybe you shouldn't shred things. So you'd want to check in on that, but I haven't heard of anything like that recently, and I think that was more like 10 years ago when this stuff was newer and people were still a little bit nervous about it. But if you can get rid of as much paper as possible, do it. It will save you, it will feel like a weight is lifted off your shoulders, literally, when you get rid of that paper. And, so don't keep it around afterwards. But whenever you're using technology, so let's say you completely ditch the paper, right? And you do your whole intake online. You have people complete things ahead of time in a client portal, and you do all of your notes online. And when you're taking notes when the client's there, you've got your computer open, so you're 100% tech. You always still need to have a backup plan. So that's one of the biggest things with technology, is that it doesn't always work. And that might even mean your internet's down. I had a time, I was at work a couple of weeks ago, and I was calling IT at work trying to fix something, and then we figured out it was just my internet. It was nothing wrong with the system. And then I called Charter, and it was just an outage in my area for a couple of hours. So there are those things that happen, and the last thing you want to do is be scrounging around and freaking out in the moment. So in order to, just like with anything, right? Crisis, like if you know CPR, all that kind of stuff, you overlearn that stuff, you over-prepare, so that when it does happen, you just jump right into action and it's no big deal. So I do always recommend you still always want to have some paper copies of your forms, of anything that you would need to take notes on. And that way, if it does happen, you don't have access, your clients don't have access, that you have that backup plan. And then ideally, then you would just be able to scan anything in after the fact. It usually works pretty well. All right. And that's not to scare you, but it's just the truth. Technology is going to fail at some point. So you want to be prepared, and then it's not a big deal. All right, another big thing with technology is to delete what you don't use. So this means, I teach people to do this with their paperwork. So like if you have an intake form and you find that clients skip over this one question all the time and it's not really a big deal, you never follow up on it, well then why is it even there? Just get rid of it. If you find yourself not using it and it's not important. Same thing with technology. So delete as much as you can. Keep things as simple for yourself as possible. So I know there are some EHRs that offer more flexibility than others as far as personalizing things. So for example, I'll just use one that I know because I was helping someone with. Theranest is a really, I think, very user-friendly EHR. However, I don't really like their treatment plan. Just is what it is. I like pretty much everything about Theranest except their treatment plan. And The treatment plan isn't a big deal. It just has these different steps. And what I was helping another therapist with figuring that out and what's needed and what's not. And really about half of the treatment plan steps in that EHR weren't needed for her. And so I was like, well, just put it in this box and this box, and then that's all you've got to do. So don't think that you are bound to the technology necessarily. It's meant to be there to help you and to make things easier for you. But if you find it more complicated, see if you can simplify it. Maybe you just write everything in one box and skip the rest of the boxes. There's another one, I think it's therapy notes, where, again, a lot of people really like therapy notes, use it. I don't like their actual notes portion. So now you're saying, they're all different. None of them are going to be perfect. Just because it has so much, because it's built for with psychiatrists in mind as well. So it has a lot of extra information in the notes portion that most therapists in a private practice setting don't need. So I just recommend you just, identify the few things you're going to use and then skip over the rest, but be consistent with it and make sure you've thought through, okay, what do I need for my practice? What do I find useful? What do I like doing? What do I think fulfills my ethical requirements, meets my clients' needs, and then do it the same way each time. But don't waste your time filling out, little check boxes if they don't apply to you or they don't mean anything. Make it work for you. Also, ease yourself in with technology. So if you're new, maybe you're on this webinar because you've been thinking about getting an EHR, or you just signed up for one recently. Maybe I meet a lot of people who have actually signed up for an EHR and are using it, but are only using like just the notes portion, a very minimal part of it. So, do ease yourself in. One thing you can do if you're new to an EHR and you've already had a practice for a while is just start putting new clients in the EHR and then keep old current clients doing, your paper forms or whatever. And that way you're slowly easing yourself in. Another thing you can do is to just start with notes. That's usually the easiest part, and then sort of work yourself into the intake process, because you do want to think that process through a little bit. Maybe you can start adding treatment plans in, maybe you start doing billing. So do it in steps. And that way you're letting the technology work for you, rather than being a slave to it. Don't feel like you have to go all in all at once right away. And understand that this is huge. Anything with technology, and especially with these EHRs, not everything is going to be the same as it was before. So you may have had this wonderful paper process that you felt super comfortable with and it was smooth, and then you might find the perfect EHR. One that's just got these awesome notes and it's got a client portal and you can upload everything and you can personalize it. No matter how much you can personalize something, it's never going to be exactly like it was on paper. So that's something you just need to understand and prepare yourself for ahead of time, that it's not always going to be the same, even if you switch from EHR to EHR. So some people have done that. For example, some EHRs allow you to do video conferencing with clients if you provide therapy online, or some don't allow for a group practice. And so if you're growing, then you have to switch. It's every EHR is not going to be the same either. So that means that sometimes your process of working with clients will change a little bit. And that's okay. And it's, it doesn't mean that it has to be drastically different. So you want to think about what you did before, but then be open to how it might work in the EHR, and try something new. I would say, again, ease yourself in. Don't try doing everything completely new all at once, but do know it's not all going to be the same as it was. Okay, so a big part of sort of easing all the anxiety with some of the stuff that we've talked about is to really organize your systems. So we don't want to be like this girl here, and have things all over the place. We want to be super organized, know where everything is, and that'll make us happy. All right. So one thing, and this is not the exciting part of private practice or of having an EHR, but it will save you so much time and headache, is to really write out every step. So, for example, like Becky was talking about with really large agencies where they have such volume, they really can't afford to have multiple things mess up. They will write out every single step of every single process. And that means one way we used to talk about it was you think about if you get a glass of water, okay, if you had to actually write out the steps to go and get a glass of water and bring it to someone, it would be quite a few steps. And there would be these things that you didn't even think about, like you have to walk over to the cupboard, you have to open the cupboard, you get a glass out of the cupboard, you set the glass on the counter, you close the cupboard, you pick up the glass, you bring the glass over to the faucet, you turn on the faucet. So you'll see there are a lot of different steps that you wouldn't think about because it's a very easy, simple process. So this is what you want to do, maybe not quite to that level of detail, but the more detailed you can get, the easier it will be for you to transition. So you want to walk through first as a client. So think about your clients as far as the EHR and the way in which you use it with clients, which again, could be a bunch of different ways. But however that works, how do clients get login information? How are they going to receive it? How do they, or maybe they don't, access information within the client portal? So if you provide that ongoing, how would they access it again? If you have clients go in and sign things on a client portal, but then you don't really use it after that, how could they get access to your cancellation policy, for example, if they want that 2 months later? How do they confirm an appointment with you? And maybe that's completely outside your EHR. Maybe you say only through phone calls do we do appointments, or phone calls and texting. But these are all things that you really, with your intake process, you want to have these things written out ahead of time. And then you want to think about it from your own point of view. So write out every step as the clinician. So how do you know as a therapist that the appointment's confirmed? And how do you know that your client has confirmed the appointment or that they know about it? So a lot of EHRs offer scheduling within the EHR. So you may choose to allow clients to go into their own schedule and reschedule an appointment themselves, or you may choose not to do that. But how will you know that that's happened, that your schedule for tomorrow or for Thursday has changed? How do you access information entered in the client portal? So if you're having clients enter information, you want to make sure that you also know, how to get in there and read what they've written, print out what they filled out if you want to print it out or access it. Do you save it somewhere? How do you go in? So a lot of times with intake forms, again, I do recommend that people have clients fill things out ahead of time, but then you'll likely want to add to that as well. So will you be able to add to that form? Will you have to add that to a different form, or will you just add that to your note for that session? Those are all things you want to think about so that you're not trying to figure it out with clients in the room. And lastly, how do you upload paper forms? So that's a big thing you need to know no matter what, because if you're going to use an EHR, you need to have that as a backup always. So how do you upload paper forms? Where do they go? If you upload paper forms, will clients have access to those? Those are all things to think about. All right. So moving on to our last point here. How do you keep your clients engaged throughout this whole process? Because we've talked a lot about some techie kind of stuff and really setting up things and being very precise or systematic and organized, which is great. But and that is setting you up for success when you're meeting with your clients, because the more that you can take all of that stuff away so that it's not getting in the way of you actually engaging with your client, the better. But we have some other tips too. So the big thing with intakes in general is to set the stage. So remind your clients that this session is different. I definitely recommend that in the beginning of the session. And your first session should be a little different because ethically, we all need to review what are the benefits and the drawbacks of therapy. We all need to review what are our limits to confidentiality, at the very least, those things. So even if you don't get into insurance fees and how all of that stuff works, which I still think is important to review, it all depends on where your client's at and when they come to see you. So that's why I say the intake process may be ongoing. It's not just a one-time thing as far as informed consent. So you may be talking to clients about your cancellation policy, 6 months from now, 2 weeks from now. You may be talking to them about insurance policies and how all that stuff works 3 weeks from now. But the key is that there are certain things you have to discuss in the first session, and you want to make sure that you let clients know that you're not like pushing them away, you're not keeping them back. You still want to engage and build that rapport through that process, and really highlight that your first session is for the two of you to make sure that this is a good fit. Because it is, we are not all the perfect fit for every client, and that's okay. And it's important to let your clients know that so that they don't feel pressured and they don't feel weird. And it definitely helps to put people at ease. So let them know it's, no pressure. You just want to get to know them a little bit. And then I recommend that you let them guide you, let your clients guide you, rather than letting forms or processes even guide you. So as far as intakes go, I do like to do a pretty thorough historical background and ask lots of questions and do more of an intake, quote unquote, during the first session. And that's just how I work. I know that's not how everyone works. However, when I'm doing that, I'm not going through, okay, this is page 1. I have to ask, this question about their education level, and then make sure that we talk about that, and then go to page 2 and then ask them about their family history. No, it's still a conversation. So everything with your intake process, whether you're talking about confidentiality, whether you're talking about your policies and how you work as a clinician, whether you're talking about their background, it's all a conversation that you're having, okay? It's the forms and policies are just the way that you work written out on paper. So they are not dictating necessarily what you do, okay? So I recommend if your client comes in and they start talking about their family, you can say, great, I'm so glad I want to get to know you. I have some papers here, or I have this computer here. Again, think about how you're going to have it set up. Maybe you have a tablet. I'm just going to take some notes while you talk. And I really want to make sure that I understand what the problem is that you're experiencing so that I know best how to help you. And that way it really helps people to realize, okay, this person's taking notes, but it's not like what you see in the movies of, the therapist sitting behind the person taking notes about them. It makes it a much more collaborative process. So if the client starts talking about, something on the 4th page of your intake, go there, and let the session really flow. And then what I'll usually do is sort of guide people through. And then at the end, I'll always ask people, I'll first tell people, let me look through my notes here and just make sure that I have everything that I need, make sure I didn't miss anything. And I always do that. So that's one big tip. I have done tons and tons and tons of client intakes, especially when I worked in an agency. And as much as I did it and as well as I knew that paperwork, every person that comes in is different, every session is different, and there was always something I forgot to ask. So, and in that setting, you couldn't leave anything till like the next week to ask, or it wasn't the best way to do it anyways. So, I just let people know that, and no one ever seemed annoyed by it or anything. I think they really got the sense that I was truly trying to understand them and make sure that I had everything I needed to help them. So, make sure that that's sort of like at the end here, communicate with your clients while you're taking notes. So if you do take notes during your intake process, especially if you're at the computer, because that, for some reason, I find that most therapists feel that that is more disengaging to be at the computer typing notes while their client is talking than to be writing notes on a pad of paper or on a form. It's really not that different, but it feels less engaging for a lot of therapists. So make sure you let people know, oh, okay, that's really important. I want to make sure I take a note of that, or ask for further clarification. You can definitely let them know. And then again, let them know at the very beginning, I will be taking some notes. So if you see me typing, I'm just trying to get all the information and make sure that I know how best to help you. I'm not ignoring you or messaging or doing something like that. So as long as you keep that communication open, even if you're looking away, then most clients will stay engaged through that process, and you'll be able to stay engaged yourself. All right, and lastly, really a big thing when you're going in to a new process or a new way of doing things, anytime you're using a new technology, even if you've been using an EHR for a while, they're constantly adding things, updating things, creating additional options that you can add in. So there's always things changing, and I can pretty much guarantee it'll be changing for quite some time. So, go in with an open mind and with a goal to serve your clients. And when you go in with that, then you'll find that things typically do become easier. It's not a big deal. And things will not always go as planned, but as long as your goal is to serve, then that will come across, and that'll help you with problem solving as well. Make sure that you check in often with your clients and, create a no pressure zone. So with intake, you never, the first few times you're seeing people, you don't want them to feel pressured that they have to, bare their soul to you right away. You want to make sure that they have a chance to feel comfortable with you, and let them know if they don't feel comfortable answering any questions or talking about something, they can always just let you know that, and you'll respect that. And as far as if you are using a computer or a tablet, something like that, while you're working with your clients or doing an intake, just check in with them. How are you doing? Let me take some notes here. How are things going for you? How's this process going so far? And ask them too how they liked the intake process. You'll find that most clients are very willing to share with you information about how the intake process, the forms, getting a hold of you, all that administrative stuff. They will give you that feedback, but they often won't give it to you unless you ask for it. So I was working with one therapist, and she sends out anonymous surveys. So she gives people a survey that they can complete after they finish treatment with her, and they can just mail it to her if they want to. And it's totally anonymous, so she doesn't know who has, mailed it in and who hasn't. And she got really valuable feedback on being able to get in touch with her, and how, the voicemail system worked, and random things that she wasn't necessarily getting feedback from current clients, maybe here and there, but then it became a real pattern when she was using that survey. So ask your clients, whether it's in session or afterwards or whatever, especially if you're changing with current clients from paper to EHR, if it's something that they notice. If you're just using notes, it may not really be something they notice, but ask them how it's going for them, how their experience is, and be open to that feedback so that you can make changes. And lastly, I always recommend that you be willing to be in the hot seat yourself. So, be willing to do what you're asking your clients to do. Be willing to go through that process of what it's like to be a client using an EHR. If you have a client portal, make sure you've done it yourself. Make a fake client and go through. Make sure you know what that experience is like, and put yourself in the mind of someone who's seeking counseling, is in that place where they just want help, so that you can make that process as easy as possible for them. All right, and just to summarize here, planning ahead is crucial. I hope I've hit that point home. Anytime you're using technology, just make sure you're planning ahead. And technology can really enhance the clinical relationship if it's organized. So if you are prepared, if you have things set up, if you know what you're doing with the technology, if you feel fairly comfortable with it, you don't have to feel 100% comfortable with it. We all have different comfort levels with technology, but you want to make sure you've practiced with it, right, before you just open your doors and have clients coming in and using it. So make sure, and if you do, there's so many awesome things that these EHRs can do, like text reminders, which are huge for clients, with the client portals, being able to just give your clients a login and have them really securely access their forms, with software that allows you to do video conferencing and journaling. I mean, there's a lot of really, really cool stuff that technology can do for us. But you just want to think about it ahead of time. And then, as always, communication is still the key to avoiding frustration and avoiding disconnection, whether that's in the intake process, in person, face-to-face, or whether that is ahead of time when your clients are trying to fill out forms or get access to even how do they get to your office, that sort of thing. Never underestimate the power of the phone and of using your interpersonal communication skills, even when you are trying to become super tech savvy. All right, well, thank you so much. Now let's go over back over here.
Great, Melissa. Thank you very much for that. And
yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, we do. It looks like we have a question from Cheryl. And if anyone else has questions, feel free to type them in so that Melissa can answer them. And before we even, while they're typing in their questions, I had one question for you, which is, if folks, what are the services that you provide to therapists to help them with this?
Awesome.
Describe that. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a few different things. So I mainly focus on documentation, and what I do with documentation is I focus on teaching you how to make it really meaningful to you in your practice. So if that's fully paper, if that's fully electronic, if it's a hybrid, no matter what it is, that means making your intake forms sound like you, making your process work for you, and considering your clients as part of it. So thinking about if you work with kids or adolescents, that's very different than if you work with a geriatric population. You may not want to use a client portal if you focus on older adults, whereas you may, a client portal is not going to be any big deal to a teenager. So as far as EHR, those are the kind of things that we think about, but I always focus on it in relation to documentation. So I have a couple of workshops coming up. I have an online workshop at the end of the month. That's kind of a quick overview of documentation. It's 2 hours. It is approved through NBCC to give you 2 continuing education credits. So that's probably a good introduction to what I do as that workshop if you're interested. It's going to be Monday, July 25th.
Okay, I'm going to put that down. So Monday, July 25th. What time is that?
It's at 4 p.m. Pacific.
4 p.m. Pacific.
So in the evening if you're on the East Coast.
Yeah, they can find out about it and sign up for it at qaprep.com.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, if you just go to my services section, you'll see all my workshops there.
Okay, good. All right, great, awesome. And it looks like we have some questions here. So cool. Cheryl's question is, well, she has a 2-part. First of all, what do you think of Office Ally? I've used them for billing, but haven't had confidence to start their EHR, had some training. And then the second part of her question is, or do you recommend a certain EHR company?
Yeah, I don't recommend a particular EHR. I've heard things from people. So ones that people seem to like a lot are Simple Practice, Theranest. They're both extremely similar. Not identical, but very, very similar. Also similar in price. They have different pricing options though, so that's something you want to consider, based on the size of your practice, based on whether or not you have clinicians working for you. Another one is Therapy Appointment, and that one I think is a little less modern looking is the feedback I've gotten, but people really like the functionality of it. And then counsel, so I think it's COUNSOL, is one that has like the client journaling options and video conferencing. So I've heard that people really like that option as well. But again, I think that one is a little bit more techy. So you want to look at, how techy are you? How comfortable are you with that kind of thing? And then most of them will either give you a free trial for like 2 weeks, or they will, at the very least, if you call them, they will definitely walk you through it and let you see what it's like. So that's what I would recommend, is make sure you have a chance to try it out before you invest money in anything. And if, all of these ones I've mentioned, different people really like them. So it just depends on what your preference is. So make sure you try it out. And if you're like, oh, I don't know about this, then there are plenty more. So keep looking and try out the next one.
Okay. All right. And then Lisa asked, this may not be the forum to ask this, but I saw your interview with the owner of online counseling, and I'm wondering, how do you do the intake when the client is online?
Oh, that's kind of interesting. Yeah. And that was Clay Cockrell from the online counseling podcast. I think that's what it's called, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, as far as the intake, I think it depends. There are certain people who do the intake in person still. And I think Clay mentioned that he does that a lot of the time, actually. So it all depends on why you're doing counseling online. Actually, a really common use of it is that people do the intake in person, maybe see people a little bit in person, and then do like a hybrid and use it for clients that like travel a lot, or clients who maybe really want a certain specialization, but they live, like an hour and a half away. So it would depend on the type of clients you're seeing. And as far as that goes, if you were doing an intake online, you would just really want to think about that preparation part. And as Clay mentioned in the interview from last month, the big thing with doing counseling online is just like with all the EHR stuff, having a backup plan, making sure you have a phone number so you can call people if something gets messed up or whatever. So you just want to make sure you have that all set up ahead of time.
Yep. Okay, Judy asked, my EHR does not provide a template for the treatment plan. Do you recommend something where I can make up my own form?
I have a sample treatment plan that you're welcome to use on one of my blog posts. I think I can type it in here. If you type in 5 steps to an effective treatment plan, that is a blog post I wrote, and there's a sample treatment plan you can download there. But in general, with treatment plans, you just kind of want to think about what's your client's goal. So like, what does your client actually want to do? And then how are you going to help them get there? And how are they going to participate as well? Don't leave out the client participation part.
Okay, good. Raya says, I'm offering free face-to-face consultations. Is it necessary to go through all the forms in that session? I do cash for service, so I want to give them opportunity to get a feel for me. And I don't think focusing on paperwork is the best way to get clients to connect with me.
Yeah, I would say it's, again, your paperwork is just a reflection of the conversation you're having. So what you're probably talking about in that first session is the stuff that's in your forms. How do you work together? What are the benefits of therapy? What's therapy like with you? And that should all be in your informed consent. So you are kind of going over informed consent. And then I would say maybe at the end of the session, you set it up so that you have some opportunity to review that more formalized stuff, and make sure that clients do have a chance to look at that, know what your cancellation policy is, know whether or not they're going to be texting you, that kind of stuff. Those are things that, they're not crisis things to review, but they are important to review with people, just so that you don't have miscommunication down the line. And then I would still, in the beginning, I would still let them know, because even if they're not technically your client yet, you're working in your capacity as a therapist, so you would still have all of your regular ethical obligations as far as confidentiality. So you wouldn't want people to be upset if you did have to report something or if you had to take some sort of action, even if it were that first session. I mean, that's probably unlikely, but it's something you don't want to ever happen. So, so I would still maybe, do a 2-minute little spiel in the beginning to introduce those topics.
Okay. All right. And Judy says, I love Simple Practice and their customer service is awesome. And Cheryl asks, I couldn't catch the name, what practice for the EHR company? Talking Simple Practice there?
Yeah, there were a couple. Simple Practice, Theranest, Counsel with an O at the end, and Therapy Appointment. So those are all EHRs that I've had clients use and say they like, and I've tried most of them myself. And they're all just different, but yeah, they all work pretty well.
And Therapy Notes as well, right?
Yes, and Therapy Notes too.
Okay, good. Are you seeing any other questions in there, Melissa? I see.
Nope, I don't see any other questions. Are there any other questions about intake, about EHRs? If you love your EHR, give it a shout out, help others.
Yeah, yes.
And that's another thing too, definitely if you're if you're on Facebook, there's a lot of great Facebook groups for therapists, and you can post in there, I'm looking for an EHR, what do you like about yours? And that's kind of a more helpful way to get feedback too.
Great, cool. All right, well, I appreciate you very much coming on and talking with the whole Counseling Wise crew about this.
Yeah, of course.
I'm glad we had some questions here, and it's great timing that you have your workshop coming up. So
yeah.
That's good. So everybody feel free to go check that out at qaprep.com. It will be Monday, July 25th, 4 p.m. And yeah, go ahead and check that out on Melissa's website.
And I do also have a free crash course people can sign up for. So if you want something kind of free to just check it out, if you go to my website, you'll see it there at the top. It's called the Private Practice Paperwork Crash Course. And you do get a login, and it's a whole little course that you can go through all at once if you want to. And I do go through, treatment plans and notes and intake assessments and all that stuff. So you can try that out too.
Awesome. Great. Cool. Okay. Well, thanks so much for your time. We're going to call it a wrap. And for anybody who came on late, we will have a recording and we'll send it out to everybody. So no worries about that. And thanks again, Melissa. It's great.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.